This is the Caregiver Support Community Statewide call. I'm going to share my screen briefly so that I can share with you how to get to agendas and recorded webinars that have been archived on our GWAR website. So if you go to our GWAR website and you click on technical assistance, you will see here our Title IIIe programs and resources. If you click on family caregiver support, you will have information here all the way down at the end under Wisconsin Family Caregiver Support Calls. You will see the archived webinars dating back to 2021. And I simply click on March 2023, and there's the agenda. This will also be where you find Janet Zander's updates, notes from each of the meetings. And then as an example today, I have a PowerPoint, so that's where the PowerPoint will also be housed. So hopefully that helps for anybody who had questions on how to find call-in or other information. I will stop sharing and I will hand it over to Janet for today as we get started on advocacy updates.
Good morning. And I know you have a really packed agenda today. So as Bryn said, I did give her a written report that you'll be able to access on our website. A few things that I wanted to highlight today. The first is a survey that's happening right now that's being conducted by the Survival Coalition of Wisconsin Disability Organizations. Our agency is a member of that disability organization. And what they're trying to do is really lift up those personal stories to our state legislators who are working on the state budget to help them understand the impact that the shortage of caregivers is having on people with disabilities, older adults, family caregivers, as well as paid care workers. And I know that all of you intersect with that at various different places, and your help in sharing that survey, and there's a link to complete it as well as a QR code that people could scan. So that we make sure that along with all the data and information that we have packaged for them about the workforce shortage, both paid and unpaid, we also have those boots on the ground stories from the people who are impacted in their communities, their constituents. So please share that with those that you're working with, anyone in your agency, anyone in your communities, your support groups, et cetera, to hopefully get a really robust turnout for that. The second thing I wanted to mention is a new Alzheimer's Facts and Figures report that came out. It is a national report, and I linked to it, but it's a long, 100 and some page report. But I thought some of you might be looking for new updated data, and I did pull out the Wisconsin statistics here so that people would have those readily available too for any work that you might be doing around Alzheimer's or dementia. So wanted to just make sure you all had that. Regarding Aging Advocacy Day, registration is now open. It will stay open until April 26th. Of the issues that we'll be talking about will include both family caregivers as well as paid caregivers and some issues associated with the needs around caregiver supports. We will also be talking about transportation, home delivered meals, and Aging and Disability Resource Center funding. So we've got a really full slate. There is a link to our Aging Advocacy Day website that has promotional materials, sponsorship opportunities, as well as a link to registration. So we have about 100 people registered now, and we've got 6 weeks to go before our actual event. And last but certainly not least is as we prepare for Older Americans Act month in May, the Administration for Community Living has put out the latest theme as well as all of the toolkit pieces that we can use. So the logos, the posters, some social media ideas, templates for proclamations, et cetera, and wanted to put that all in front of you as we know the National Family and Caregiver Support Program is part of the Older Americans Act programs, and this is a great opportunity for us to promote both the great things they do and also the challenges that you still face. And that is it for my updates for today.
Thank you so much. Always so much information. So knowing that there's so much information, please always go back to those notes. Janet does an excellent job of providing the PDF ahead of time. I post those in the notes so that they're there for you whenever you might need them. Okay, and then if I look at our agenda, it looks like we're rolling right on into DHS and GUAR updates. I will let Lynn share anything that she might have, and then I'm going to give my few minutes actually to Trualta. This is the second month this year so far that I kind of bumped them, so I appreciate their patience, but there was kind of some pressing need, I felt like, in having some conversations that we're going to tackle today around FAQs. So I will let Kunal and Laura Jane speak and share the updates that they have, and then we'll move on to the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so I will be quiet now and leave it to you, Lynn, for any DHS updates.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. I just have two quick things for you today, really. First of all, I just want to thank those of you who took the time to review the new aging policy that we're putting out, the new manual that we're putting together. Some of you gave me some really good responses and suggestions that I've incorporated into what will be the final version. We still have a way to go before that's posted on SharePoint for you all to use. But I really do thank you, and you may have also received the nutrition section now too. The nutrition chapter went out, I believe, for comment too. Our department is sending out each chapter of the new manual to be reviewed in sections and to make comments on along the way as we then post it for a new updated final version. So thank you to those of you who gave me some feedback. Second of all, I just wanted to share that we are looking, DHS has a state advisory council, an aging advisory council that advises the department on all things about aging programs, and we are looking for at least one, maybe more new members to join. And in particular, we're looking for some representation from the northern part of the state or from maybe underserved communities. We've got some pretty good representation from, other parts of the state. And then, but anyway, we're taking some applications for new people who may want to join. And what they do is they advise the department on things regarding the state aging plan, just in what we're doing in general with aging programs. So there is an application that I'll forward to Bryn that she can attach to the notes. And I encourage you, if you know anybody who would be interested in maybe serving on that, there's only six times we meet per year, and you can do it virtually if needed be. So hopefully that will make it easier for people to give their time to this. And we'll send that along, and feel free to post it in your newsletters as well if you want to get it out to people in the community. It would be great if we could get somebody who's a caregiver or knows about caregiver supports. That would be a wonderful addition to the council. So we'll share that with you, and please, we ask that you distribute that widely so we can hopefully get some good representation on there. And that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. I'll turn it over now to Kunal and Laura Jane with Trualta for any updates.
All right. Thank you so much, Bryn. It's great to see everyone this morning. I want to share a few quick updates with you, and then we'll do a deeper delve at an upcoming meeting. But wanted to just quickly share, one, the tremendous growth that we continue to see on the Wisconsin portal. This time last year, we were around 650 caregivers on the portal, and today it's over 1,200. So it's almost doubled in the last year. So I want you all to know that your invitations into the portal and the self-registration, all of your outreach efforts, they are making a difference. I know sometimes when you're adding just caregiver by caregiver, day by day, you don't see that big picture. But as of today, there are over 1,200 caregivers on the portal. So thank you all for your continued partnership. And I'm glad to see that this is a meaningful resource for caregivers in your state. Then I wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about a couple of recent updates. So I think Kunal may be on if he wants to jump in.
Thank you so much, Laura Jane. Are you sharing your screen? I'm not able to see it.
I am not sharing my screen.
Okay, just give me a moment.
I'll turn it over to Kunal.
Sorry, guys, back-to-back meetings today.
No worries, we've all been there.
Laura Jane, I just sent you the link. Do you mind sharing your screen? I'm not able to on Teams.
It looks like Laura Jane has frozen, so I'm not sure if that impacts her ability to share. If you'd like, Kunal, you can send it to me and I can share it.
Absolutely. I'll send it to you right now, Bryn, on email. Until then, I'll continue chatting about a new exciting feature on the platform, and that is the community chat forum. As of today, if you go onto the platform and you log in, you see that there's a community or a community tab on the top. When you click on it, there's a new option that has been added to the list, which is community chat forum. That is a place for caregivers to interact and learn from each other. Basically, it helps them feel connected and less isolated, seeing their own situation in a different perspective. And we've seen that it helps improve their confidence in caring. This is a platform for all of the caregivers on Trualta platform. So it's a cross-country caregiver communication forum, but it is also moderated by a Trualta care educator. So this is a place where caregivers can definitely learn from each other. I would highly recommend that you take a look at it and take a look at the discussions that are going on the chat forum, and recommend it to your caregivers as well. Another update that I wanted to give a shout out to is the end of life care toolkit. Now, this toolkit is meant for people who are providing care to someone approaching the end of their life. As we know, someone caring for a person with dementia might have to encounter these kind of questions and situation at some point in their caregiving journey. This presents a sensitive overview of topics that will help them feel supported and reduce the uncertainty of providing care and comfort. It includes a lot of topics such as how to take care of your own emotions, how to provide comfort care to your loved one, and how to plan for the future. Those are two big updates I had for you. I wish I could have shared my slides. That would have made this conversation a lot more meaningful.
Laura Jane got him up. We saw him.
Oh, perfect. Okay. All right. Do you guys have any questions about these?
I don't see anything in the chat and I didn't hear from anybody. I also offer the updates that Laura Jane sends to us in our GWAR newsletter. So there was information recently about a webinar where caregivers came together to lean on one another and share some stories and offer resources. And I included that webinar link and other resources she shared as part of our GWAR newsletter. So as we get those, in addition to giving Trualta some time at our statewide meetings, please be on the lookout for information in our GWAR newsletter as well.
Thank you all so much for your partnership and the opportunity to participate in in these meetings. We really appreciate it. And like we said before, keep up the incredible work. Have a great day.
Have a
Thank
great day, everyone.
Okay, now I'm going to transition to a bit of, I guess it's really the meat of today's meeting. And this really wasn't planned. It kind of came up as I saw a need. I think there maybe has been turnover, but also more people just taking on some responsibilities as it comes to Title III-E and the Alzheimer's Family and Caregiver Support Program. So with new people learning from folks who've been running these programs for so long, there still is unanswered questions or maybe a learned way of doing it that that really needs some change or process improvement. So I'm going to share what I have learned. And please note that this isn't, criticism or any wagging of the finger. This is truly all of us learning together, teachable moments so that we can move forward, doing things consistently and in a better way. I would also offer that I am doing much of the conversation, well, most of the presenting today. However, the true gurus regarding the data management piece for Wells Sky and SAMS is going to be Carrie Kretz, who's joining us today. And for DHS RedCap is Lynn Gall, who you all know. So there will be Q&A at the end, and they are going to be my trusty backup to help answer those. I would also offer that I'm going to try my best to get through the presentation without taking time for questions. There's 16 slides. Some of the information is repetitive, so I might breeze through it pretty quickly, but thought it was helpful to put together. And then we'll have Q&A at the end. If you're afraid you might forget that question and you want to throw it in the chat so that it's there, certainly feel free to do it, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end. I also have this transcribing, so if we don't get to it, it can be something that Lynn, Carrie, and I can chew over and shoot back out. Okay, with that, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I can only see, well, I can't see any faces. Let me minimize this quick and just ask, are you guys able to see a quick head? Okay, thank you, Kayla. So I had pulled together, I already gave you the intro. You know what? This is data management best practice and FAQs. We're going to cruise right through this. Some of the information is captured on our AFCSP and NFCSP 101 training series through our LMS. That's GWAR Ed. So if you're newer and you've received a welcome letter from me, or maybe if you've been a part of your ADRC aging unit or county system for some time, you saw that Kristen, our communications director, shared this information. I think it was about mid-December through the beginning of the year, how to log in, how to get access, and complete those online trainings. If you haven't done so, please do that. Even if you feel like you know everything, I wager to say there's probably information and feedback I could garner from those who've been in the network for a very long time. So if you have constructive feedback to give to me about maybe the narration of a training or pieces that you might find helpful in the future, that is all good information. So please go back to that if you haven't yet finished it. What's covered in some of that material is the purpose of Title III. Title III is the largest of the Older Americans Act, so it has the most amount of funding. It provides federal funding to state agencies on aging. Title III programming has no income test, and the purpose of it is to support older adults 60 years and older, and as we know, they're family caregivers within the NFCSP or Title III-E program. I tried to make this presentation one that is something you can go back to with links, print out, and use as a reference. Of course, as soon as you print it out, sometimes that means it's already outdated. However, a lot of this information is found on ACL or other websites such as our GWAR website or DHS. So at least that gives you an idea of where to go to for information that's covered. For example, right here, this link under NFCSP eligibility is our fact sheet. It recently has been updated, so it has all of the accurate definitions and who's eligible, and is a quick at-a-glance to share at caregiver conferences and the like. I pulled this definition right from ACL as far as who's eligible. So we're talking about adult family members or other informal caregivers who are 18 years and older and providing care to a frail individual 60 years or older. Frail means that there needs to be assistance in either one ADL and IADL or two ADLs and two IADLs. Most of the time, I'm going to offer just my experience. If somebody has a caregiver of sorts coordinating or tending to them, chances are they would meet the frail definition and needing assistance with ADL and IADL. This also is a situation where an adult family member or other informal caregiver 18 years or older are providing to an individual with Alzheimer's disease or dementia of any age. The other piece of the NFCSP grant is supporting caregivers who are not the parents, but are relative caregivers ages 55 and older. They're providing for children under the age of 18, and I tried to capture all that I was aware of that this can sometimes be called. Different work groups call them the RCP or relatives as caregiver programs. Certainly kinship is a familiar term that we well know. And there's also grand families and relatives as parents program or RAP, R-A-P-P. All of those are essentially talking about the same thing. So if there's any confusion, hopefully that helps do away with that. Similar to the NFCSP fact sheet, I've highlighted the relative caregiver fact sheet. This outlines more specifically the situations that you might find individuals 55 and older eligible or not. I also put in here how to find your kinship coordinator by county. So that link will bring you right there. And then the fourth situation for NFCSP eligibility are older relatives. This is including your parent situations, 55 and older, who are providing care to an adult age 18 to 59 with a significant disability. And as Lynn mentioned, there is the caregiver policy that's currently, well, I guess now March 17th, it closed for feedback, but it's in draft. And as it becomes finalized, there's the definition of what significant disability is according to our policy. I will also offer, as I move into this, the Title III and the Alzheimer's caregiver information is applicable for statewide programs and operations. However, and I appreciate that Carrie pointed this out to me, the claims piece, as I get into some of those points, that would be specific to GWAR's service area. So if you're joining today from Milwaukee or from Dane County, just keep that in mind, that as I'm talking about, or maybe as we're answering follow-up questions related to the claims form, that might be different in your operation or setup. So I just wanted to give that caution. As all of you know, the Title III-E was part of the reauthorization of the Older Americans Act in the year 2000. So we're, into 23 years of operations of the program, and it certainly has changed throughout those years. And I think that's why this capturing of all the information in one place is helpful, because there's been a lot of change in the past 18 to 24 months in particular. And part of that is the required minimum services within the Title III-E program. I've tried to make them as clear as I could in the next 2 slides and give examples. So as you're thinking about your working day and what you're doing to work with customers to come to the ADRC or aging unit, and as you're doing tasks throughout your workday, you can kind of get a feel for what service this might be, whether you're capturing it on your time and reporting or whether you're immediately in the moment entering information into Well Skies and SAMs. So the first is information services, or most commonly known as public information. The examples of these are when you're presenting about our caregiver grant programs at a conference, if you're sharing information in your monthly newsletter, maybe radio appearances or press releases. Any of those types of broader outreach, which isn't one-to-one, is going to be considered information services and public information. The assistance, which is number 2 of the 5 minimum required services, is case management and INA. And sometimes that can be used interchangeably, and it also gets further confused because ADRC and that grant program also uses INA, but sometimes in a different way. So an example of how we would capture our duties and our time under assistance is if we're providing that one-on-one information about a service available for a caregiver in their community. Examples are going through your resource directory and identifying in-home care providers, or maybe even making those phone calls with them. And certainly this is where you would capture your time for the caregiver needs assessments and reassessments. Caregiver respite, I think, is pretty self-explanatory, but again, over the years, I think how we've viewed respite has changed. So some examples of that are in-home or facility-based, whether it's day program or overnight, household chores, and then even tasks such as snow removal or lawn care or caregiver self-care, things that alleviate responsibility from the caregiver are going to be considered respite care services. Going on to slide 5, the last 2 of the required minimum services. Number 4 is supplemental services. So these would be home delivered meal, helping to enroll them in a program. It may be the C2 program, or it might also be Mom's Meals or some other type of home delivered meal program. Helping to coordinate transportation or the payment of mileage, as an example, would be a supplemental service, and then legal or financial services. And then last but not least, and this is all one category, caregiver counseling, training, and support groups. I did the definitions as concise as I could under number 5 to explain that training is instruction provided to a caregiver so that they can improve their knowledge or their performance of a specific skill relating to their role as a caregiver. So if you're teaching them maybe something very technical on how to do safe transfers, or how to the purpose of meditation and massage therapy or aromatherapy, those types of very tangible, teachable moments relating to their role as a caregiver and how to do their job better, those would be examples of training. Support groups must be led by a trained individual, moderator, or professional. So this wouldn't necessarily be a coffee clutch or a peer-to-peer group. Just keeping that in mind. Lastly, counseling is offered by a degree or credentialed professional. A good important note in this area is that caregiver Title III-E funds need to be used in one of the 3 annually. But even if you don't provide Title III-E funds to, let's just say, caregiver counseling and training, as long as you're providing access, that would also meet the need. So if you don't have an in-house counselor that you're referring your caregivers to, but you know how to refer them, and whether it's through the local hospital or maybe it's another nonprofit or what have you, you're able to get them access, that's certainly meeting the need. What's also important, and some of this I too am now just learning in my role because different situations arise, is that there is a waiver for Title IIIe that's eligible, and you can request this for any of the 5 areas. You want to do this during the budgeting process, just because late requests are difficult to back out. So be thoughtful as you're creating budgets from year to year about what you feel like you have been able to achieve or what might change in the future. And the other important piece, well, there's 2 important pieces, is just having a plan in place if you can't meet that need. So let's say you don't have caregiver counseling, training, or support group dollars allotted from Title IIIe. So you want to go ahead and request a waiver. We don't think we can do that. The waiver has been approved because you've explained how you're going to offer that alternatively outside of 3E funding. Don't use that as a reason to not offer it in the future. So what I would say to that, or what I'm trying to get to, is if you find that there's an identified need for caregiver support groups and now you have a trained leader, please feel free to move aside that waiver in your mind and begin to offer that. So even if you have that approved waiver, if you find later that you can offer the service using Title IIIe funds, we would want you to do that. Okay, I haven't seen any questions come through, but I also don't have my full screen. So please feel free, if you have questions, to throw those in the chat as we move along. There are 16 slides, so I will cruise through pretty quickly to make sure that we can hit all of them. NFCSP is the larger chunk of this presentation because there has been so many changes, and I tried to capture some of those resources and frequently asked questions starting on these next 2 slides. First is the 2023 caregiver registration form has been updated right under NFCSP in our family caregiver tab of the GWAR website. Any NFCSP spending needs to match. Any NFC spending needs to match a corresponding service in WellSky SAMS. So I know that this is a change, that sometimes a lot of the work of case management might have been put in a certain category and not necessarily designated to a program participant, and that has changed. And that's what I refer to here in the 3rd bullet point, is that new in October of 2021, and then enforced in January of 2022, INA and case management do require units, so a program participant attached to an entry in WellSky and SAMS. A full list of examples and definitions of those 5 service categories can be found here on the DHS Aging SharePoint. It's a very comprehensive definition of services and subservices. And then we also have now the soon to be finalized caregiver policy that Lynn spent a lot of time pulling together. Hopefully those will be 2 very good resources for you. I use them daily. Another kind of problem-solving piece in some of our administration of the Title IIIe program is understanding that Title IIIB funding can be used for admin time. So examples are, if we're discussing as an aging unit or staff how to operate, or reviewing policies related to the NFCSP program, or there's other indirect staff time, you might be able to use that admin time under your Title IIIB funding if that's available. The more condensed version of the services, definitions, and caregiver info and units can be found right on the GWAR website. So this is the link that brings you to the services reference sheet. And then I included this. I know it feels very random. Probably the next slide too will feel a little random, but I do get questions. What can be carried over from each program from year to year? So for NFCSP, there's a 10% carryover allowable each year. Well, that doesn't look very pretty. I will fix that before I save it to the GWAR website. But the other information in here is helpful. Again, they feel very random, but there's some confusion because things have changed throughout the past couple of years. So I wanted to put them black and white and in writing, so there's some historical knowledge, and then how we move forward from that. So what has been discontinued in 2021 was the service cap limit of 20% on supplemental. So that has now gone away. There was also once a cap on of 10% on the grandparents raising grandchildren. That has gone away. So if you find that you have many grand families that you can support using NFCSP dollars, please do not be afraid of any type of spending limit. I think by now we all know that both in AFCSP and NFCSP, these two pieces have also been waived through the end of this year, which is the cap of 112 on respite, and then non-professional payment to primary caregivers was once not allowed, has been waived, and is now allowed. As a matter of fact, that's how many individuals in our caregiver programs are seeking some type of respite, is that at least there's a little bit of a financial benefit to possibly caring for your loved one and offsetting other costs for the caregiving responsibility. When I go out and do public presentations, because I know that so many counties operate differently, I do stress this point, and I want you to be aware of that I understand, I think we all understand that counties do an excellent job of trying to make your caregiver dollars stretch. And that might mean that there are still wait lists for some counties. So I wanted to take this opportunity to just remind you that you can explore if Title IIIB funding is helpful for that care recipient's need if they're 60 or older. And if Title IIIB isn't able to meet their needs, or there isn't funding there, or maybe they don't qualify, please consider that time to explore whether or not a grant through the Respite Care Association of Wisconsin is helpful. And then I just wrote that that would be considered helping them to apply for those services and complete the application would be considered case management and would fall under the service category of assistance. AFCSP is a little easier simply because there hasn't been any changes. I think you all know that there's a required diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease or other irreversible dementia from a physician and MD, that the person resides in the community or home setting, and that the person with dementia and their spouse have a gross annual income of $48,000 or less. We would always want to deduct any of the cost of care associated with the person with dementia from that annual amount, so that we're accurately capturing what their income is minus those diagnosis related costs. I also put a link to the financial worksheet in here. And this is to be used when determining eligibility for the person with dementia and their spouse. And of course, you would want to do this annually because each year you would need to make sure that they financially qualify. I did also make a note, and this is also on the worksheet, that if the current year's income is too uncertain to estimate, the past year's income may be used. I did kind of speed through this, but I also have linked up at the top here the AFCSP fact sheet as well as the AFCSP tribal fact sheet. Slide 9. AFCSP is governed by DHS Chapter 68. I have included that link. Again, much of this I think that you guys know, which is the goal to enhance the lives of informal and family caregivers as they help the people with dementia in their lives to remain in the community for as long as possible. AFCSP dollars are allowed or given to each county and tribe for the purposes of respite and purchase of goods and services to meet the caregiver needs. There is an annual spending limit of $4,000 per individual care recipient, but agencies, and many have, established a lower limit, maybe $2,000 as an example, so that they can serve more families. Again, sometimes waivers just go unknown, so I wanted to make sure I pulled that out and highlighted it, that waivers are an option, and that if you would like to request one, you would send that to Lynn. She usually, when responding, CCs me in so I can see if a county has an approved waiver or not. And you would want to explain in that request the extraordinary or unexpected situation, such as a change in condition for that care recipient or the caregiver possibly, safety or physical danger and or risk of becoming homeless or placed in an institution. There haven't been as many changes again in AFCSP over the past couple of years, but I wanted to make sure that I could again provide some historical perspective as to maybe some changes in how we can move forward. Each aging unit is required to spend a minimum of 40% of their funds on respite care in the AFCSP program. Tribes do not have to spend that same minimum amount, but we would certainly encourage them to do so. Primary caregivers may receive a non-professional stipend rate. This is different. In the past, that wasn't historically an option. And then I put the same services reference sheet for AFCSP here, as I included in previous slides for NFCSP. If someone isn't eligible for AFCSP and they reach their $4,000 annual maximum amount, the caregiver may then enroll in NFCSP for the rest of the calendar year. Of course, they can't be enrolled in the program at the same time, but that is an option to make sure that you're still getting the caregiver's needs met. Again, I've put in here just a reminder, always consider what alternatives there might be. If the care recipient is over the age of 60 and there's Title IIIB funding that can use to help blend and braid services, please consider that, as well as exploring the Respite Care Association of Wisconsin. I would also offer, I think it's in July, both Nick, who's our transportation OAA consultant, and Angie, who's our Title IIID health promotions consultant, will join us so we can talk a bit about how to blend and braid some of those services within Title IIIE together. Sometimes when we get so great and very knowledgeable in our area of expertise, we have a hard time expanding beyond that or understanding how other programs could serve to function and support one another. So it's my hope they can offer us some creative ideas on how to do that. As far as carryover for AFCSP, it's 3% that's allowed annually. And this is important. Agencies can use up to 10% of AFCSP funding for administrative costs. So again, if in talking about the operations of your caregiver grant programs, there's operations and discussions, and you don't quite know where to put that, if it has to do with the administration of your AFCSP programs, just keep in mind that up to 10% can be used for admin costs. The next two slides are a little bit random. Again, just putting things down that I hear lots of questions about. That's why they're called FAQs. So I'm fully aware there is not necessarily a whole lot of rhythm to this or streamlining. But again, my hope is to condense everything in one place of frequently asked questions to both give some acknowledgement to history and what has been practiced to how we're moving forward and how we can operate in the future. NFCSP funds are only allocated to counties. Tribes receive AFCSP and Title VI funding, but not NFCSP, which is different from AFCSP, which is allocated to all counties and tribes. For NFCSP, there is no income limit to qualify for participation. And as we just have talked about, there is a $48,000 gross annual income limit for the person with dementia and their spouse in AFCSP. There is no annual spending limit for participants except the $5,000 annually on home mods within NFCSP. But there is a maximum annual spending limit of $4,000 per care recipient in AFCSP. The 20% supplemental service limit has been discontinued since 2021. Again, I know I already said that, just keeping it in there because I've heard it come up before and I don't want that to be a reason why people feel that they can't offer different services. Also, what has been discontinued is the 10% spending limit for grandparents raising grandchildren. And as we know, for both AFCSP and NFCSP, the cap of, well, in NFCSP, the cap of 112 has been waived, and paying the primary caregiver a non-professional stipend has also been waived. And then I think the only other thing that I haven't covered is that relative caregivers. Oh, I get why I put this in here. Relative caregivers, so your grandparents raising grandchildren or other relatives, aunts, uncles, would use the same registration form to enroll in NFCSP. But there is obviously going to be some sections that don't apply. So you're not going to necessarily be answering information about ADLs and IADLs for the grandchildren. You can feel free to skip that section. And the other question that kind of fell along with that situation is, do I then have to put the caregiver into REDCap? And the answer is yes. You would want to, for both NFCSP and AFCSP, enter in caregivers into DHS REDCap. Again, some frequently asked questions. I won't go over the details of medication management, but just know that it can be tricky. We can absolutely support it and cover it with our NFCSP grant dollars, but how to categorize the service that it falls under might be the tricky piece. It comes down to if it's bubble packing and delivering, if it's set up by an RN, or if we're talking about the purchase of a med machine. So just be aware that if you need more assistance, just certainly feel free to reach out to me, and I will do my best to get you the information that I can so you can feel like you've captured it correctly. AFCSP, I already reviewed that those funds go to counties and tribe. The piece that kind of confused me, at least, was why AFCSP contracts are held with GWAR in some aging units, and how come the contracts with AFCSP are held with DHS in other situations. So what I learned was that state legislation allows counties to decide which local agency they want to administer their AFCSP program. So as an agency, GWAR only contracts AFCSP with local aging units. And if a county chooses to have, for example, their Health and Human Services or Human Services Department administer the AFCSP program, DHS includes that AFCSP in their state county contract. So I'm not sure if anybody else had any confusion about that or inquiries or just trying to understand that. The reason that comes into play is sometimes toward the end of the year when we're looking to de-obligate and re-obligate, GWAR has a little bit more flexibility into the beginning of the next year to do some of that. And that's the reason for that, and how we're able to move some of those funds is why that's important to know. Also, a caregiver may access funding and respite hours for anyone that they're caring for. An example is that a daughter who might be the primary caregiver for both her mother and father, both with dementia. In this case, the caregiver, again, if all the other eligibility requirements line up, the caregiver may access up to the maximum annual amount allowed for each of those individuals. So for each of her parents. That question comes up a lot, so I thought, again, always good to put in black and white. And then something that's applicable to both programs is that the county of responsibility can be based on the caregiver or the care recipient. Oftentimes, it makes the most sense that if the care recipient's needs are that of direct care and home care, it would be where they live in the county that they reside in who would want to enroll them because they're most familiar with the local resources. If the caregiver is mostly in need of individual counseling or training or services directly for them, that wouldn't be a situation where it would make the most sense that the caregiver would apply and participate in the caregiver grants of the county that they reside in. Before my time, there was this AFCSP and NFCSP combined fact sheet that was created. Pardon me. Again, it's a 2-pager. but it's a quick at a glance of each of the programs to kind of do a comparison for eligibility quickly and what they might offer. So that sheet can be found here in this hyperlink. We're approaching the end, guys. I'm going as quick as I can. SAMS and WellSky, not versus, but in comparison to DHS REDCap, is also something that has come up a lot of times in phone calls and emails. So I will put it out here, and if there's questions, let's certainly chat about that in the last few minutes that we have. For SAMS and WellSky, NFCSP services are always entered. In DHS REDCap, you would want to enter the caregiver, the care needs assessment, the caregiver information for both AFCSP and NFCSP. So for both programs, information goes into REDCap. For SAMS and WellSky, AFCSP services is entered if you're using that as your NFCSP match. So services are entered twice, once as AFCSP and again as NFCSP. So this is smart to do, to use your AFCSP funding as local match for your NFCSP program, but just recognize that does require a bit more of data entry. For SAMS and WellSky, you're collecting demographic information to help identify populations that are most benefiting from services and maybe some populations that you're missing and that you need to identify further outreach efforts. For DHS and REDCap, you're entering assessments. So these assessments, caregiver needs assessments, are to be completed at least annually, but only the first assessment needs to be entered into REDCap. And for all of us who do a ton of paperwork and are used to putting in assessments upon reassessments and enrollment information and case notes, that feels a little different, at least it did for me. But hopefully that comes as a relief. It only is the first assessment for the caregiver that needs to be entered into DHS REDCap. I see I missed one bullet point under REDCap, which is the purpose is understanding and identifying the caregiver and care recipient needs through a uniform needs assessment. And then you would want to have that information entered ideally by the end of the month that the caregiver enrolls, or at a minimum quarterly. That's just so that you don't get behind. It's so that our data and our statistics, when pulled, is accurate and informative. And if we obviously get too far behind, the data doesn't give us the consistent information that we want it to. With SAMS and WellSky, the services are to be entered by the end of the month following the month when the service occurred. So a real life example of that is if a service took place in October, it should be entered by the end of the following month, which is November. There's a piece in here that gets a bit complex. So don't spend, well, you're going to have to spend some time on it, but I don't want to get too far in the weeds. So I've included it for the purposes of just knowledge, which is that caregivers receiving respite or supplemental services for care recipients who are 60 and older do require an annual reassessment of ADLs and IADLs to qualify for NFCSP, and that information is also entered into SAMS and WellSky. Those of you who have been doing this many years, this probably does not come as any type of surprise, but for somebody new who's trying to understand the two data systems and data entry, I wanted to be sure to capture that. I put a best practice in here, reassessing caregiver needs and updating services provided, as well as discussing new unmet needs. You would want to be having those updated in SAMS and WellSky, at least annually, similar to DHS REDCap when you're reviewing the caregiver needs assessment. That's just for practical purposes, to making sure you're not over delivering or under delivering, and so that the data that were entered and captured is accurate. SAMS WellSky is capturing the quantity of the services provided, and DHS REDCap is really entering the assessments. This is also through NFCSP and AFCSP, where you would want to offer the initial and post evals to measure the impact of the program on the caregiver's well-being. That's where we did, I think it was 2 months ago in January, review all of the information about how people have come to their counties, their aging units to get some relief, accessing the grant programs, and sharing areas that they felt more comfortable in, more confident in, and then their customer service experience with the aging units. Those surveys can be found here on the link. They can be done electronically, which is very easy if you have somebody who is comfortable doing that via email. You can just send them the link, or you can print off the survey. And if you need more envelopes, Lynn is your contact. Loan closet items, we have 5 minutes. So we actually toyed with whether or not we were even going to leave this in here. It can get tricky because ideally we want any costs and expenses that are listed on the claims form to be matching within that same month to services that are entered into WellSkies or SAMs. We know that for a variety of reasons, there are situations where that may not happen, and loan closets might be one of those. So I did include 2 links of what might be included in a loan closet. But I think the biggest piece here that Carrie Lynn and I spoke about is that we want to encourage you to purchase supplies and public outreach material throughout the year, not just a big push at the end of the year when you recognize you might have a few $100s left over or something, and you're purchasing and restocking and making a whole bunch of hundreds of dollars potentially of purchases and not even sure that you're going to be using them. So as you go through your year and your stock dwindles, go ahead and restock as needed. All of this is to say that we need the reports in order to highlight that we've met the performance standards, that we're serving those who are most in need, that we're in compliance with the regulations that are expected of us. It's also information used as to budget decisions and how Congress disseminates the money. That information can be used to advocate. The reason we have Janet a part of all of these meetings is to recognize what needs to get in front of policymakers and decision makers. So it feels sometimes very distant, but your work does facilitate all of that. And at a more local level, the data can also help you recognize the populations that you haven't been reaching, or maybe those that are underserved, and you can focus some of your programming efforts to better reach out and meet their needs. So we are to slide 16. I've left 3 minutes for questions and answers, but I will be quiet and let those questions come through so that Carrie and Lynn and I can have a chance to answer for you. I see there's a question. I have had caregivers ask if there are plans to increase the gross annual income amount for AFCSP to help reflect the cost of living increase received in their Social Security. Excellent question. Do you want to take that, Lynn?
Sure. Yeah, actually, that's something that